Major moves are coming for Kaspa, but it's going to require the one thing that many people in crypto don't seem to have, and that's patience. So hopefully we're gonna be going through and talking about what I'm seeing going on from both a fundamental as well as a technical perspective, and why I think that this could actually lead to some pretty major gains. But we do need to, of course, be patient, because I do think we could be a decent bit away from this, and so it's important to just wait and see how it goes to make sure that the structure that we've started to see actually does continue to play out, and then of course we can go from there. So first off, we're going to be talking about kind of the state of the market, some of the macro impacts that could be impacting Kaspa on a short-term time frame, and then of course we'll go from there and we'll take a look at what we could be seeing in a longer term time frame. So let's go ahead, we'll dive right in. First off, taking a look at the crypto bubbles, we can see Kaspa down 2.5% today, seeming to be a little bit under some of kind of what I would consider as the market average. Of course, there are some that are green for the day. Kaspa, of course, not green, so not as good as some of the others, but it is holding up relatively well to what I would consider probably like the market average. If we look at the week here, we also can see Kaspa down 11%. I would say this is probably somewhat in line with what we have seen in terms of moves from the market overall. So we can take a look here at the Kaspa chart, and you'll start to see a little bit of what I've been talking about. So this is been a pretty decent level of consolidation that we have been seeing. It's looking like a really nice looking wedge that we've seen so far. Of course, this wedge does not end until January 31st, 2026. Now, of course, that is a very substantial period of time that we could be waiting to see this consolidate, and then we'll of course, have to just see how it goes from there. Now, we can see, potentially lows getting down below like the 7-cent range, and then highs will continue to be lower until we get all the way to like the edge of this, the edge of this range, which is about 9 cents. Now, the other thing we can see on the shorter time frame here is a little bit of this gap between the level of support that we've been sitting on kind of right now, and then the level of resistance that we have seen be hit multiple times in the past. So it'll be interesting to see how Kaspa price reacts in this range, and I do think it's fairly important that we do see support continue to hold it up. However, if we do kind of look at the bigger picture here, it would not surprise me too much if we see this continue to dip down a little bit, kind of for other various reasons in the future. But we'll have to see what happens on a shorter time frame, kind of, what happens in reaction to this level of support here. So we'll just check that out over time. What we also can see over a longer time period is this trend line has actually, at least on the upper side, has been somewhat respected basically since July of 2024. Obviously, we saw a little bit of a peak above here in kind of the like August and end of July timeframe. We also saw moderate peaks above here kind of in like the November to December timeframes. But ever since then, it's been actually respected pretty well. Here back in the beginning of July, here all the way through like September of 2024, here again in January of 2025. It's been pretty well respected. And so, I thought that this was interesting to point out that this is at this time, or at this point, like over a year-long thing that we have been seeing, and it's continuing to play out and potentially ending, as far as beginning of 2026. So we will have to see kind of what happens here. But overall, I think things are looking, pretty decent when we take a look at it and we zoom out from that type of perspective, for Kaspa. We can also see here on the RSI, things looking fairly average. Bollinger Bands, things looking fairly average. So we have seen a decent recovery. Obviously, we saw overextensions here. Every single time, people, every single time that we see this, we know exactly what's coming next. So, that is the thing. Sometimes when people get greedy and when things happen like this, we maybe don't take profits and make decisions that we shouldn't, but every single time this kind of comes back to true, and we've seen it play out multiple times. So hopefully you're paying attention. This is something that is very consistent, and as we've seen this happen on multiple different assets, on different charts, all of this type of stuff. Now, if you are interested in trading Kaspa, of course you can do so here through BloFin. BloFin is a really great place. You also, in addition, on BloFin can do copy trading. More on that here in 1 second. But BloFin has a really great sign-up bonus. I think it's up to $5,000, and they do kind of, in addition to that, kind of rotating sign-up bonuses as well. So if you want to click the link in the description below, you can get signed up there. We also do have that Sentinel trading bot. It is an automated trading bot. I have actually invested some of my own money into this. It's been pretty good so far. I actually invested at the peak of kind of the Bitcoin run up. And I kind of knew what I was doing, mostly because I wanted to see how it's handled it so far. We, of course, have seen a little bit of a drawdown since that peak, which is not necessarily the end of the world. Frankly, that's kind of what I expected. I just want to see how it handles it specifically. So really looking forward to that and seeing how it goes. Of course, it is investments. With investing, you do have that risk of loss. But so far, I've been quite pleased with what we've seen so far. Again, not more than a 7% drawdown at any given point. So we'll have to see kind of how that continues. So far, I've been pretty pleased with what we've seen so far. And we'll just continue to track it, and see how it performs. If you are interested, of course, you do need to sign up using my link, but you can follow this in BloFin if you are looking for some more of that kind of automated trading, and hands-off trading type of stuff, if you are interested. Now, one thing focusing specifically on Kaspa that I wanted to talk about was Davinci's recent post regarding Kaspa. Now, of course, we could see here, he says, "I like Kaspa. I think what is being done there is fantastic. However, the community hates me because I point out what even AI agrees is a problem." Now, we can see here, it's talking about specifically about the cryptocurrency fork security risks. You can see potential vulnerabilities, user habituation to forks could lower resistance to unwanted changes, more attack vectors for social engineering or government pressure, less predictable long-term protocol guarantees. And then, of course, we've got the potential benefits of fixing bugs, agile development, and adaptation to new threats or technologies. Well, we have kind of a little bit of a rebuttal or a response here coming from somebody who I'm assuming is more bullish on Kaspa. You can see here that they've actually pulled in all of the Kaspa's like architectural like design files, white paper, all of that type of stuff. So what we can see here is it points out some of the misinterpretations in the screenshot. The first one being user habituation to forks. So first off, we can see the misinterpretations in the screenshot here. Is the first off being the user habituation to hard forks. This assumes that frequent updates equals disruptive hard forks. The reality is that Kaspa's upgrades are often backwards compatible and do not result in network splits. I think this is the key point here, of course, which is why it's highlighted. But thanks to its modular Rust-based codebase and DAG architecture, changes can be implemented smoothly without interrupting consensus or forking the network like in legacy chains. So I do think that this is, of course, a major nuance that is perhaps being missed here. But I do think that, potentially the, people being okay with changes that, and not really thinking long-term or deeply about some of these changes that could be negative, that's kind of a risk implicit here. I think there are other reasons that we'll get to, which is like kind of the agility of the chain development and essentially responding to network threats kind of as or before they happen. It's kind of a double-edged sword there, right? You can't necessarily have one without the other. So this one I think is something is kind of more personal preference. The second one here we have is more attack vectors for social engineering or government pressure. This is not specific to Kaspa and lacks any unique justification here. Kaspa's infrastructure is leaderless, decentralized, and does not rely on any centralized sequencers, multisigs, or trusted third parties, making it arguably less vulnerable to targeted social engineering attacks compared to many rollup based chains. I don't totally understand the initial complaint here. More attack vectors for social engineering or government pressure. I mean, all of this is voted on through the DAO, right? So I mean, if people agree to it through the DAO, then it passes. So the only way that I could see this claim having a valid type of thing here would be is like if the team or the group proposing DAO proposals maybe gets corrupted and there's some sort of trust within the community that is kind of mapped onto this. Maybe that's the way that happens. But again, that's just people not doing their own due diligence, and there's not necessarily a change for that if that's kind of the way that it happens. If somebody wants to have an attack vector being proposing to the DAO and the DAO agrees, like that's just the DAO agreeing. For good or for bad, it's decentralized, and that's how it goes. The third one here is less predictable long-term protocol guarantees. This one's flat out incorrect. Kaspa's consensus protocols, GhostDAG and DAGNight, are mathematically rigorous and deterministic. They provide stronger predictability and ordering guarantees than traditional longest chain protocols like Bitcoin or Ethereum proof of work. There's no uncertainty just because development is agile. Same thing here. We can see, I don't really quite understand this one as well. It's less predictable for long-term protocol guarantees. I think the initial claim being made here is essentially that if the chain isn't changing constantly, then you know what to expect in the future, which is fair, but you also never know what to expect in the future, right? I mean, if there's some quantum hash breaker algorithm or something, and somebody's able to like reverse engineer Bitcoin, and all of a sudden like everybody's wallets start getting drained, like Bitcoin's going to have to hard fork, right? I mean, and that's something that like maybe people didn't necessarily plan for that. So there are these things that aren't necessarily like, there are no guarantees in life at all. And so I think to kind of misconstrue this, in my opinion, feels like maybe it's not being thought through all the way. I don't really know for sure. I think that like essentially saying that the things that, you know, saying that like since things don't fork as much means it's more predictable. I kind of understand the sentiment, but I also think there's a lot of nuance there that maybe kind of changes that a little bit. So anyway, I'd love your perspective. Anybody who's, you know, pro Kaspa, anti Kaspa, whatever, I'd love to hear your kind of input here, and as far as like, you know, Davinci's take on this versus the reply that we went over as well. I think it's fairly misinterpreted and maybe lacks some deeper understanding kind of from the initial post. And I think this secondary kind of rebuttal post seems to kind of cover a lot of those bases here. So anyway, that's kind of how I'm viewing it. If you did find the information in this video useful, of course a like and a subscribe does help. You also can stay tuned for all of the updates going on within the crypto market. You can also turn on the notification bell so you are notified every time I do post a new video, so you can keep up to date with all of the various things going on in crypto, because it is moving a mile a minute. So if you do find it helpful, you can of course do that. And then if you have any comments, questions, thoughts, whatever, just drop those in the comment section below. I do read and respond to all of those. So if you have anything that you want me to see, that would be a great way to do so. Thank you guys for tuning in, and we'll see you in the next one.